Welcome back to Social Studies, boys and girls. I would like you to get your Social Studies book and please open to page 145. I'll see you there in just a moment. Be on page 145, and the title of this new unit is called The Struggle for North America. So we are going to be talking about events that are leading up to the Revolution. I just want to remind you of our timeline. All right, so earlier this year we studied indigenous people, remembering that they have been inhabiting North America way before anybody else. Then explorers came after that, and then the colonies were the next phase of North American history. Now we're going to be moving into the years of 1754 to 1763 for the first part of our lessons together. And then the Revolutionary War will begin in 1775. So to start out with, the first couple of lessons are really going to talk about this 20-year span of events that led up to the Revolutionary War. I also want to remind you that we are not even a country at this point. We are still a colony belonging to England. And then 2021 is where we are in present day. So just know that we've had a lot of history. These are the years that we're going to be talking about, kind of in between 1754 to 1763 to begin the effects of the French and Indian War. Revolution will actually start in 1775. Our I-CAN statements. What are we going to be doing in social studies? So we are going to be gaining information about events leading up to the Revolutionary War. And then our big goal is to be able to summarize the actions of key people that impacted the time that they lived in related to the revolution. So as we read, I want you to be looking for key people that are impacting some of the events that led up to that revolution. I have one more piece of paper that I'd like to show you. And when we talk about a war, typically wars do not happen overnight. There are events that are going to make emotions even stronger. So this is just a little, I call this the snowball effect, all right? So when you have strong emotions, if those conflicts aren't resolved, the emotions are just going to grow and grow and grow and grow until finally things are going to explode into the first battle at Lexington and Concord. So the first few lessons are actually going to be talking about things that maybe start out with a little bit smaller emotion, and then gradually certain events are going to happen that are really going to cause the colonists to really have to take a side. Do we want to fight for our freedom and liberty, or do we want to stay under English rule? So we are going to be talking about these different events that eventually are going to blow up into that very first battle that happens in 1775. So let's get a start. We're going to talk about the French and Indian War for 2 lessons, and then we'll be getting into some of the other things that are going to further make those strong emotions of those people living during this time period that will eventually lead into the start of the war. So once again, just looking at this timeline, we're talking about this span of time kind of between French and Indian War and when that revolution actually begins. Let's go ahead and get a start. Again, keep in mind we're looking for those key people as we begin. You can see that there are some key people on page 146 and 147 that are going to be mentioned. Some of these people might even be those that you might have had some experience with. So maybe you've heard of Thomas Jefferson. Maybe you've heard of George Washington. They are going to be introduced on our timeline at different entry points. So keep in mind that these are going to be some important people along with the others that are mentioned here as well. All right. So the French in Louisiana is the title of our first section, and I'm going to just show you a map, and this map is actually on the very next page. You can turn and look at it there as well. So here's actually Wisconsin, where we live. The Great Lakes are here. Here's Wisconsin, and Wisconsin during this time period when we're talking about this kind of timeline off to the side here, Wisconsin and this whole section in yellow was actually claimed by France. This is where France was exploring, and they had laid claim to a lot of this land in the French-speaking portion of what's current-day Canada and into this kind of middle section of what is present-day United States. The colonies owned by England are actually off on that eastern shoreline. And then Florida and parts of the Southwest are actually claimed by Spain. So this is actually a map of all of the different countries that are laying claim to parts of North America at this time. Now, we know that many times conflict is going to grow, and many times conflict is going to be over land. So the colonies are going to have more and more people that are going to be settling here, and they are going to want to have some of this land that the French have already laid claim to. France is not going to give up this land easily, so they are going to battle over this Ohio River Valley. This is a section kind of right in this area right here. It was wonderful land with a lot of resources in, and these two countries, France and England, are going to be battling for control over this Ohio River Valley in here. And with that French and Indian War, there are going to be some hard feelings based on the outcome. So let's read a little bit about the French settling in Louisiana and eventually the war that is going to be fought. Okay, La Salle is an explorer. All right. And La Salle's picture, let me just show you. He is right here on our timeline. We're talking about 1682 when La Salle is first kind of exploring along the Mississippi River for France. So that is a picture of Robert Cavelier Soulé de La Salle. All right. In 1670, New France consisted of only a few fur trading posts in Canada. This would change after 1673 when two French explorers reached a mighty river flowing south. Native Americans called it the Mississippi, Father of Waters. The first French colonies to explore the Mississippi River were Jacques Marquette, a missionary, and Louis Joliet, a fur trader. In 1673, they traveled by canoe as far as the Arkansas River, a tributary of the Mississippi, before turning back. A tributary is a river or stream that flows into a larger river. La Salle's expedition. As word of the enormous river spread across New France, other explorers saw an opportunity to gain wealth. In 1682, Robert de La Salle led an expedition down the Mississippi River. His followers built a fort at what is today Memphis, Tennessee. Then they continued paddling to the mouth of the river on the Gulf of Mexico. There, La Salle claimed the Mississippi River and its tributaries for France. He named the territory Louisiana. A territory is an area of land controlled by another country. Plan for settlement. Excited by his discovery, La Salle sailed to France to gather support for a new colony. 2 years earlier, he had returned with several hundred men. The plan was to sail west across the Gulf of Mexico and build a settlement at the mouth of the Mississippi River. From there, La Salle planned to travel farther west and take control of silver mines in New Spain. La Salle's plan excited his followers, but it ended in failure. A poor navigator, he sailed 400 miles past the mouth of the Mississippi River, landing in present-day Texas. Many of La Salle's men died from disease and starvation. Still others were killed by Native Americans. In the end, the few men who survived revolted against La Salle. He was killed by his own men. So La Salle is somebody that's important in claiming some of this land here, all of this land, much of it, for France. He had big plans, but ultimately those plans did not work out so well. Okay, how did Louisiana get settled? Let's find out. By 1690, France had claimed much of what is now the central United States and Canada. At that time, only a few thousand settlers lived in New France. Almost no Europeans had settled in the Louisiana Territory. The French realized that they were in danger of losing Louisiana to England or to Spain, whose explorers had reached the area. King Louis the 14th of France decided to strengthen French control of the region. So I'm going to just paraphrase here. If you don't have people that are settled and living in these areas, other countries that have laid claim are going to say, ooh, there's not many people here. We're going to invade, and then we are going to take control. So France realized that if they didn't get people settled here and living here to defend all of this land that they had claimed, some of these other countries were going to come in and take over. So that's what they are planning, is to get this area settled so that they can defend it. All right, let's move on. All right, here we have a picture. This is the city of New Orleans. It was settled about 100 miles north of the mouth of the Mississippi River. The first settlements. In 1698, the French king appointed Pierre Le Moyne, Sieur de Iberville, as the first governor of Louisiana. D'Iberville agreed with the king. France needed to control the Mississippi River. To do that, France needed a larger population in the area. D'Iberville feared that English would take over, and this is what he wrote in his journal. If France does not seize this most beautiful part of America and set up a colony, it will be taken over by the English. Okay, let's talk about New Orleans and the importance of that settlement. After D'Iberville died in 1706, his brother Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne, Sieur de Bienville, became governor of Louisiana. In 1718, he founded New Orleans, about 100 miles north of the mouth of the Mississippi River. The settlement drew many settlers to Louisiana. New Orleans became the largest French settlement in Louisiana. Unlike settlers of New France, who worked mainly in the fur trade, colonists in Louisiana built plantations. Planters brought in enslaved Africans to raise indigo, which is a plant that creates a blue dye for clothing. They grew rice and they grew tobacco. So keep in mind that slavery and forcing people to work against their will is part of how the French are now setting up their colony. Parts of England are using slave labor, forced slave labor, and now France is following suit, which is hard to believe that other countries thought that to be acceptable. Slow growth. By 1740, France claimed an area from Canada down the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico. By 1760, the French had 85,000 settlers compared to the 2 million in the English colonies. However, French control of the area prevented the English from moving west. So just to recap, there's 85,000 French settlers living in this area. There are about 2 million in England. So far, France has been able to kind of ward off England. They've got some people defending the territory for France, but the 2 million people here, there's going to be some conflict over this Ohio River Valley in our next lesson. So for today, that is the end of our lesson for today. I want you to be thinking about some key people who are impacting this time period. Hopefully LaSalle is somebody that you recognize as being important, as well as some of the other people that were mentioned as far as settling Louisiana. I will catch you next time for social studies, where we are going to begin talking about some of these events that are leading up to the Revolution. Thanks for being such good listeners, boys and girls. See you next time.